Hey guys, remember to watch this video first before you start taking these notes. This video is going to go over the background to this current event so you can get a little bit more familiar with it, and it's also going to show you how it's affected people. All right, so in class I kind of went over an example of personal connection I have with this current event, and you might have your own personal connection to this current event, whether it's a relative who lives in Texas, or if you're like my neighbor, you had a friend of yours or a relative go down to this area for vacation, and now they are stuck there because they can't get out. You can go ahead and take that personal connection to help you complete your potential bias right here under the topics box. So think about your personal connection and how that personal connection might influence how you view this current event. Okay, you might be more emotionally attached and invested if you have like a grandparent who lives in Texas or a relative, friend, family member, so on and so forth. All right, maybe you don't have a personal connection whatsoever to this current event. Here is something that you might have as a potential bias. Your potential bias as a Minnesotan. Like here are some posts that I literally just pulled off of my Facebook feed from like friends from high school who posted stuff like this, kind of like poking fun at like how, oh, Texas can't handle the cold weather. You might have a potential bias as a Minnesotan, and it might influence the way you view this current event because you are from a state that deals with cold winter weather all the time. So that could be your potential bias, and you could use that if you feel like you don't have any other ones. But of course, you can have a lot of different biases. All right. We're going to do things in a slightly different order this time. We're still going to be focusing on this background information, but we are going to fill in some notes, and I'm going to go ahead and give you those notes, and you're just going to put them right here in the additional notes section. Okay, so the stuff that I'm going to present to you, write that down in the additional notes section. I'll go ahead and explain the podcast, the link, and the questions after we go over those notes. So again, you are going to just put these notes in the additional notes section of your assignment. So Texas's geography and demographics, this is something that you might want to know before you start covering this current event. It's important to know that Texas is the second biggest state when it comes to land size. You can kind of see right here just how big it is. Alaska, of course, being the first biggest. And it's also the second most populous state. Okay, so even though it has a lot of land, there's a lot of people living there, which is kind of the opposite of Alaska, where it has a lot of land, but not a lot of people living there. So Texas kind of has the best and worst of both worlds, a lot of land, a lot of people. It's also seen as a leader in energy in the United States because it just has so many different types of energy there naturally. And they also invest a lot in their energy in producing different types of energy. So they have oil, they have natural gas, coal. These all can be found within the land in Texas. They've invested in some renewable energy. They have geothermal energy, a tiny bit of nuclear energy. So a lot of different types of energy. And their climate is arid and humid, just meaning that it's warm most of the time, it's dry, and in some areas they do get some rainfall, which is why you can see these green areas in places like Houston. All right, if you need more time to write or type this up, feel free to put the video on pause and push play when you're ready. All right, their energy use and production. This is also kind of important to get a very brief background on in order to understand this current event. They are seen as a leader in the US for energy production because they produce 1/5 of our energy. And what that really means is they produce like 1/5 of our oil and petroleum and gas. We get that from Texas. In fact, most of their own energy uses oil and petroleum. So even though they have invested in a lot of different types of energy, most of it's oil and petroleum. And this industry is also responsible for consuming most of the energy in Texas. Okay, so it's kind of like the saying you have to spend money to make money. In order to get this energy resource, you have to use a lot of energy to get it. Okay, so for drilling, refining, shipping, all of this energy to get it where you need to be, that takes energy in itself. And this graph just kind of shows you who is using the energy in Texas. You can see that industrial is responsible for over half of the energy use. Oil and petroleum is not all of this industrial section. It's a part of this industrial section, but they're a part of this sector that uses a lot of energy. And then we all know that the residential area is being hit real hard by a lack of energy, and they use 12.7%, so not a whole lot of the energy in Texas. If you need more time to write that down, go ahead and put the video on pause and then push play when you're ready. All right, these graphs, don't worry, don't get scared. This is just showing you who is producing energy and who is using energy in Texas. In this graph, we can see who is producing energy, and that's mainly natural gas and crude oil. They're producing most of the energy in Texas, and renewable resources are a very small amount. Same thing with the consumption side over here. This is showing us who is or what type of energy is being consumed or used in Texas. Most of it's natural gas and oil, which makes sense because they are doing most of the production. Very little is from renewable resources, which makes sense because they are producing very little in Texas in comparison. All right. So that's it for your additional notes. What you're going to be doing today is using this link right here, this podcast, to fill out questions 1 through 6. It's about 13 minutes long, which I know is kind of long for some of the resources that I post. So I went ahead and I just put the times at the end of almost every single question. So that way you know about what time you'll find the answer for each question. So for example, question 1, you're going to find your answer around 3 minutes in. You'll also notice that question 1 through 5, those are all labeled level 1. That's because you're going to be doing level 1 thinking, where the podcast is literally going to come out and give you the answer. Okay, so for number 2, level 1 question, you know that they're literally going to say the answer between 3:30 and 4:45. All right, question 6 is a level 2 question. This one doesn't have a time because remember, level 2 questions, they're not necessarily going to come out and say the answer. You're going to have to use the information presented in the podcast in order to come up with an answer. Okay, so this one I put last, so that way you're going to take the information from question 1 through 5 to kind of come up with your answer for what factors contributed to this power outage. If you have any questions on this, or if you want me to check over your answers, feel free to pop into that Google Meet during your scheduled block. You can call or text that Google Voice phone number, or you can always email me, whichever one you're most comfortable with. Good luck, guys.